Welcome to Creepskates Reviews. I'm Mitch, and today I'm reviewing a film that I watched expecting it to be holistically terrible, and I only left with mixed feelings. This film is no other than The Taking of Deborah Logan. This movie, for the most part, was actually pretty cool. It far exceeded my expectations. Unfortunately, the higher you soar, the further you have to fall when it all goes wrong. And wrong it did go. It starts as a documentary about a woman's descent into dementia. And as the trope dictates, you have to tell everyone about it in white lettering on a black background with a really slow fade from black transition for the suspense that doesn't exist because this has been done a million times. Deborah Logan was played incredibly well by Jill Larson. As are most of the characters in this film, in fact. It really helped to set the scene. You saw tenderness being portrayed without clunky lines of exposition. You saw dynamic and complex character relationships. You saw the resignation of Deborah's daughter Sarah, played by Anne Ramsey, as she's at her wit's end dealing with her mother's disease and pulling the strength out of nowhere to help her.
Wow, your blood pressure.
What?
You know stress is the real killer, right?
Don't worry, I plan on dying of cirrhosis of the liver anyway, okay? Right?
Well,
And Deborah's character, as well as being played impeccably, was actually a really interesting part of the movie. Some of the characters' performances were underwhelming, but still, the rest of the genre should be taking notes from this half of the film in particular.
Whoa, what was that? What was that? What was that?
did it come from out there?
Yeah, it came from out there. What the fuck was that?
Deborah is a prideful conservative woman with a stiff upper lip and dementia. I'm in based on the mere idea of homophobic conservative white people doing unsavory things that would tarnish their imaginary reputations. You know a character is developed well when you can still have fondness and empathy for them, even though they personify a lot of what you think is wrong with the world.
I guess I would have, a senior moment. Sure, I'd put the toast in and it would pop up and I'd push it back down again or something, toasted twice.
Like when Deborah hassles her daughter for wearing whatever she finds comfortable. I thought, ugh, Deborah's awful, but since she wasn't a caricature only comprised of what the plot needed her to be, there were moments when you realized behind the facade, Deborah didn't want to be a prude. She wanted love, but her ego got in the way of reaching out. I loved how she had such a strong, unshakable ego and the next minute she's doing something she'd never do in a million years in her right mind. It made it interesting to watch, and that's what characters should be, interesting to watch, not just pawns to move around. This role and theme in general allowed the characters to really express the humanity behind the facades they put up. In one instance, Deborah would act proud and pretend she didn't want Sarah to stay around, that she was all fine by herself. But the next she'd have an episode and she'd be calling out her name, and then in one of the most powerful scenes in the movie, Sarah was calming Deborah down, telling her to breathe with her, and despite all the unspoken bullshit between them, you could see their closeness, the raw relationship underneath it all.
Breathe with me.
It was kind of sad because you could tell that Sarah had long left that life behind before her mother had turned ill and probably hadn't seen her for years and years. And I imagine that would have bothered Deborah. But they didn't need to shove that sort of stuff in your face. It was sort of implicit. Sorry I'm talking so much about characterization, but it's so refreshing in this genre. The documentary idea was a cool setup that didn't seem ridiculous. Like other films where you hear a noise in your house and then spend $10,000 on the best home security system ever, or arbitrarily buy a massive-ass camera just because.
She thinks there's something in the house, I don't know.
Even if this was a drama and not a horror, the first half of this film would have been spot-on, engaging filmmaking. So watching the spirit of this evil man begin to take over Mrs. Logan was cool in the beginning, admittedly, especially since Sarah was going to be his 5th victim, and her neighbor Harris had killed this evil guy and buried him in their yard. Apparently he would have achieved immortality or something after it. A dubious premise, but we can deal with that later. As I said, the raw humanness of Deborah losing herself was great. There are a few cheesy parts that added little. You know, like the part where she somehow gets up onto the bench without a frame passing by to indicate her climbing up. For the most part, seeing Deborah's actions go from forgetful to downright absurd and terrifying was great.
It was all quite a fright with your late night gardening. Do you remember? Really?
Then, as if the movie changed to a director with attention deficit disorder, the plot just pinballs off various clumsy tropes and cliches till the end. If she was fucking shit up in the house and ingesting dirt and running around naked all over the place, why didn't they just handcuff her to her bed at night or something? They didn't even explore even locking her in her room at night. Sure, Deb might have tutted the idea, but I'm sure she'd prefer it to being found like this. By the way, how did no one see Deb dig up the body, put it in a bag, and hide it in the attic? There's like 10 people in the house, and every time they hear the slightest movement, they're like, "Where's Deb?"
What was that?
I'm gonna go check on Mom.
And I know this evil guy did some vaguely mentioned Monarchan rituals involving snakes, but why would snakes be attracted to their place? I mean, the guy massacred snakes. Wouldn't they want to stay away from him? How convenient this guy who failed the ritual to become powerful can move things with his mind while in Deborah's body. If he has those powers in death, why couldn't he stop Deb and Harris killing him in life? They mention they actually buried him alive too.
Burn, bitch, burn. Now let's get the fuck out of here. Hey, what are you...
So at the end of the film, when Deborah has taken the somehow cooperative, obvious bald cap girl down to the ritual site, and she's found with the girl's head in her mouth, it started to make sense why the writers seemed to be juggling this sort of clumsy plot that was falling through their fingers like soup. It started to make sense why they were trying to cram in these half-baked, nonsensical, and comparatively sloppy backstories and expositions about some murderer who took kids and did rituals with snakes. You know that same mythological bullshit in every cheap horror film with a super cool scare that needs an explanation? Like, all that characterization, and she pulls this stupid snake face at Sarah, and Sarah's like, "Fight it, Mom, fight it." And I'm like, your mum's gone. Your mum belongs to CGI now. And then after it, her mouth is just fine and totally not torn to shit. Good, I'm glad that you're okay. Then it ends with full head of hair, previously obvious bald cap girl just pulling a creepy smile at the camera. I'm like, but they burnt the evil dude's body. Wasn't that the whole thing? Purification by fire or whatever? And how the hell was the little girl a good choice for a vessel? I mean, I guess she goes to school so she could kill other schoolgirls to finish off the ritual, but this dude seems fairly immortal as is. I mean, he healed this little girl, and she somehow grew perfect hair. Or maybe this was just the product of some overly determined writer reverse engineering a clumsy plot from a mildly creepy idea that should have been forgotten before the end of the next beer, not planted into an otherwise kick-ass and complex film. Like, you can't go from setting a precedence of subtlety in having parts like the characters, for example, filming the documentary in the reflection of the window and speaking candidly after a take like you'd expect them to, and then end the film with, "Oh, crazy snake mouth," that heals instantly and not expect people to be all like,
What the fuck did you do?
So this movie is kind of like me when I go for a run. I sprint out of the house and fall on my face halfway around the block. It just couldn't keep up with all the ridiculous, complex sort of scares that it wanted to incorporate and ended up selling itself short. The first half was fantastic and subtle, and then the second half might as well have been any other crappy cookie-cutter, formulaic horror movie that's come out in the last 10 years. But that's just my opinion. If you have a different take on things, Leave me a comment in the comment section telling me where I went wrong. If you liked the video, hit subscribe. Maybe check out some of my other stuff. I've been Mitch. This has been Creepskates Reviews. Thanks for stopping by.